Mental health workers of Reddit, what's the most fucked up thing you have seen? A patient on our ward, with chronic schizophrenia and delusions of persecution, having already blinded himself in one eye and amputated a finger in the past, managed to get some craft scissors and castrate himself while under our care, and flushed his testicles down the toilet. He came out of his room into the hall with a bloody V down his hospital pant legs, a bit shaken looking, but otherwise calm. Edit 2. Just remembered another one. A 30-something guy, again with these religious-based delusions, became convinced that God wanted him to cut off his arm. So he built an elaborate guillotine in the woods near his town, and had the whole thing arranged where he chopped his own arm off, put a belt tourniquet on it, walked to town, and had someone call 911. He was brought to our hospital and medically stabilized, then transferred to our psych unit. When first admitted, he was clearly hallucinating the voice of God. He was completely unperturbed at the fact he did not have his right arm any longer. He was right-handed. After about a month of treatment, his psychosis diminished, and it was really sad to see the beginnings of regret forming for him. Wow, telling this one, a lot of other really fucked up stories are rushing back to me. I no longer work in inpatient mental health, I'm on the outpatient side now. I don't miss the intense horror and sadness at all. By far, the most heartbreaking things for me usually involved repetitive movements and the person being nonverbal. Let me explain. I was helping cover night shift for a residential treatment center. As I'm doing room checks, I hear this repetitive banging sound coming from the room at the farthest end of the hall. Go down there as quickly as I can, and see the girl laying face down, raising her upper body up off of the pillow and slamming back down on the bed over and over and over again. All while she was asleep. When I grabbed another staff, they just kind of shrugged and said, "Yeah, she does that like every night." It's sad, isn't it? Turns out it's a thing called RMD, and can sometimes happen in kids for a variety of reasons, but hers was definitely mental health and trauma related. Also, had another teenage girl get brought in right after a guy had picked her up, gotten her high on bath salts, and sexually assaulted her. I saw her sitting in a chair, completely nonverbal with an absolute blank expression on her face, bruises and cuts on her neck and legs, just rocking back and forth and twisting and pulling her hair to the point it was all just a giant knot. I can handle screaming, sobbing, fighting, all of that. But when you see someone who is completely non-responsive just doing the same movements over and over again, you feel completely at a loss. We had a non-verbal extremely low IQ client who would self-soothe by sticking her finger between her eyeball and her eye socket and rub the side of her eyeball. Our assumption is that she has an extremely high pain tolerance and the stimulation may have actually felt good to her. Holy hell. How is that not damaging to her eye? She's also blind. As a psychologist, I sometimes pick up hours at local clinics, weekends mostly. I specialize in children and family issues. A family came in randomly with their 5-year-old son. He had not spoken in a month. Not a word. A month ago, this poor child watched as his 6-year-old brother drowned in the family pool. The parents were unaware that both kids had gone outside. Unbelievable trauma. The 5-year-old had a 1,000-yard stare. Parents were crushed. Edit. Kids with an autism spectrum disorder are 160 times more likely to die from drowning, especially unattended in family-owned pools, compared with the general pediatric population. Had a patient when I was in my psychiatry rotation in medical school who had said that he had killed 2 people when he was in a gang 15 years ago and was now hearing the voice of God telling to hurt himself as punishment. He kept darting his eyes around the room. Definitely creeped me out during the patient interview. Not a mental health worker but a camp counselor at a camp for underprivileged kids. We had a camper who had blind rage. He would be completely normal then randomly would f***ing snap. The very last day of camp, he was just waiting in line for something when someone threw a rock and it hit the kid who had blind rage directly in the eye, causing him to bleed from his eye. I have never heard a worse scream in my entire life. He then starts running towards the kid who hit him in the eye. It fucking took 4 staff to get this 10-year-old to not fucking kill another kid. I worked in a psychiatric medical institute for children. One girl, about 13, had been pimped out by her mother and abused by several men. One night at bedtime routines, she hadn't come out of the shower yet and had locked herself in. When she finally opened the door, she had bit into her hand, and her veins and tendons were showing. She kept moving her hand to watch them move. Craziest thing was that once she was transported to the hospital, her mother made jokes about how her daughter just wanted to see what it tasted like. This girl basically turned into a celebrity around the campus because all the other children thought she was a G for what she had done. Got stories for days. Thanks to a family member who worked as one of 3 mental health first responders in a med-ravaged city of over 100,000. There's the dude who was found in the park with his hands completely rubbed raw because he was using rocks to remove his fingerprints. Severe paranoia, thought the mob and CIA were after him. The 600-pound lady who had a psychotic episode and thought God told her to reach inside of her cat, managed to fit her giant arm down the cat's throat, but when the cat died she couldn't get the cat off. Simonian called the police because of the sound of someone shoving their arm down a live cat. Blood everywhere and deep scratches. She apparently got her arm in there down to about the elbow. My family member showed up after the cat was removed from her arm, but heard about the scene from more than one officer. He then had to interview this woman after she did that. Crazy stuff. I have many more similar stories, but I'm running late for work. If anyone's interested, I can share a few more. I work in the forensic side of mental health. Where do I begin? PT was drunk and was physically assaulted by her boyfriend. Upon arriving at the hospital is hysterical and tells nurse she was sexually assaulted in the back of the ambulance. Medic denies it. During the investigation both are asked to take lie detector tests. He passes. She fails and tries to commit suicide, saying the police have been horrible to her and accused her of lying for attention. She now has brain damage. DNA results come back. She was telling the truth. Woman claims her co-workers at a fast food restaurant are controlling her mind with their iPods. They aren't really co-workers, they are secret military police. They make her black out and gang rape her. She gets pregnant and gives birth under their control, and they take the baby and start raping her too. Every night she can hear her daughter begging for help but cannot get to her. She starts calling 911 saying her daughter is being raped and ends up making dozens of calls before she is arrested for misusing 911. She never had a daughter. She refused to believe this and kept screaming at us to go find the bloody sheets in her closet as proof. There were no sheets. I've never seen a human being as scared as she was before that day. But none of it was real. Young guy in his early 20s. Found guilty of raping several children from infancy to 10 years old. Admitted that he started molesting kids when he was a teenager. Admitted to bestiality. He purposely chose infants or disabled kids because they couldn't tell on him. He had journals where he talked about his crimes and drew cartoons of his assaults. He also wrote about his future plans for assaulting more children and invented torture devices he wanted to build. He had plans and diagrams where he was planning on surgically removing his own penis. This guy was a Hannibal Lecter in the making. After he was found guilty and committed, he started torturing himself. He would try to think of painful sexual things to do to himself, and if he found out he was not the first person to think of that particular way to inflict harm, he would rage out. He was obsessed with finding new ways to hurt people in a sexual way. He violated himself multiple times with a plunger while dunking his head in the toilet. Poop. So much poop. Especially in the hair. The smell lingers for days. I've seen and smelled some in my day. Don't work in the mental health profession, but I remember when I was in basic combat training there was a girl in my platoon who often just stared at us without blinking. She'd open her mouth to speak but would just mumble. She'd sometimes say things about eyes being everywhere, watching her, and I think she refused to eat the food provided because she was paranoid. She had a weird speech pattern as well. And at night when we were asleep in the female barracks she was caught wandering around talking to herself and the supposed giant spiders she claimed to see crawling on the ceiling. Long story short, she was sent to the psych ward after having a mental breakdown that was triggered by the presence of the drill sergeants. She claimed they looked like demons. come to find out she was a paranoid schizophrenic, and they did not even catch that in her mental evaluation before shipping her to training. Thanks for watching. Please consider liking the video and subscribe if you want more Ask Reddit.